welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Steve Wyss, and I'm joined by Jonathan Fadugba. How are things doing, matey?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. We're back. Hope you are well. Everything's fine with me. Happy to be on the show with you again, old friend, and looking forward to this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah. What have you been up to recently then, Jonathan?
A lot of football, to be fair. Been watching the old 2020, whatever they've, I don't know how they've branded it, but yeah, games every night, isn't there? Champions League and Europa League. It's not much of an evening's entertainment here apart from football at the moment. So yeah, no, I've been really enjoying it, I have to be honest. And I think one takeaway from it is the level. Just I've been really impressed with the level. And I think, sometimes when you watch, as I do, I watch a lot of sort of lower league games and obviously Scandinavian football. The level when you see the top end of European football is just stunning, really, isn't it? I've been gasping at some of the games I've seen. Just think the technical level, the intensity of the matches is so nice to watch. And I think we should really congratulate all the players and teams in it, especially given the environment at the moment in the world. I think the fact that they've prepared for it, I think everyone deserves a pat on the back, really. I think it goes a bit taken for granted.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think fair play. I think fair play to the authorities as well for managing to fit all this in. I think that they come under a bit of criticism, don't they? But I think a lot of leagues across the world and, UEFA done quite well, really, to get this schedule going so we can enjoy it and actually get these competitions completed to a conclusion. There was maybe a couple of leagues that hastily finished their seasons too early, but nothing can be done to change that now. We just move forwards, don't we? So, yeah, it's been good to watch.
100%, and yeah, it matters closer to Scandinavia. It's definitely they've definitely progressed, haven't they? 16 games now in Sweden, and we're over halfway through the season in I think both leagues now. Yeah, I mean, at the halfway stage, I think we're going to start with Sweden, aren't we? But what's your general takeaway from the quality you've seen? Just before we do get into that, we're 14 games, 15 games, some teams in Norway. What's your, linking it to the, as you've said, getting the games on and that kind of thing. What's your takeaway been from a Scandinavian point of view?
I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I actually sent out a tweet just this evening about the amount of goals in a game recently in Norway, and there's been a staggering number of them. And I think there were 66% matches have been over 2.5 goals. I think average goals per games is 3.13 this season, which is higher than I've ever known it since probably over a decade ago, when the league was probably wilder than it is now. And I think the main reason is because the leagues have actually started in much earlier in the year when the weather's better from a Norwegian point of view. But I've enjoyed it. The crowd in Norway's made a difference. I know you've only had a couple of hundred people in there, but they really do sound quite noisy sometimes. So, yeah, it's been a very enjoyable experience from my perspective following the Eliteserien so far this season. I don't know how you feel about Sweden.
Yeah, I think they need congratulating. One thing I think it's been difficult to follow from a kind of analysis point of view, just because there's so many games. It really has been a packed, chock full schedule. But that also says that the players have got a lot of strain on them, and I think they've done well to sort of get the league going and get games back. I think the league has been maybe not rushed. It's obviously a necessity, but certainly fitting 16 games into about 2 or 3 months is a real intense schedule. I think there was one team I watched the other day this is only like 2 weeks ago or so, and then I checked their schedule and they've played 4 games since. They had 4 games within 15 days. So it just tells you how rapidly quick fire these games are coming along. All in all, yeah, it's been obviously a bit of a tight schedule, a tight season, tough on teams that don't have the biggest of squads, but it's gone pretty well so far, I think. And there's things calm down a little bit more now. There's a break coming up for a couple of weeks, I think, and then games sort of go back to the once a week schedule to finish the season in December. So the last 14 games won't be as tightly packed as the first 16.
Yeah, very well said indeed. So, like you mentioned there, we are going to start this episode with the Allsvenskan section in Sweden. And for the viewers who don't know the state of affairs, Malmo are top of the league, 16 games played for everyone. They're top of the league on 35 points. Elfsborg still going strong in second on 31. Djurgården on 29 and Norrköping on 28. Down at the bottom, there's 3 teams on 13 points, Helsingborg, Kalmar and Falkenberg. So the most recent round has just been complete. I know you were watching a very interesting game between IFK Göteborg and IFK Norrköping, which ended in an away victory. An interesting clash. Important that Norrköping got back on track. Göteborg might have won the Swedish Cup, but their actual league form isn't so good. What are your takeaways from that particular game, Jonathan?
Yeah, the battle of the IFKs. There's been a few times where I've tweeted IFK and then I get, you get a tweet back saying, which one? We've got a few Peking fans following us as well as the IFK Göteborg fans. And yeah, it was it's not a derby of anything except name, but it was a clash of 2 teams who have been in the doldrums. Both of them in the bottom 5 of the form guide, really on bad runs of form. Let's be honest. Norrköping went into this game with 3 straight defeats. They lost at Häcken 2-1. They lost at Helsingborg, and then they lost at Hammarby. At home to Hammarby. So they went into this game complete slump. It was only a few episodes ago that we were talking about them being unbeaten, top of the league, cruising. Clear title favourites. Nowhere near that now. Really falling behind the pace in terms of challenging for the title. So this was a big game for them. For IFK Göteborg, an even bigger winless streak. It was 10 without a win. Really, really worrying times for IFK. I've said on a previous podcast that I do worry about them this season in terms of potentially even being relegated maybe. We talked about them and AIK as 2 teams who really may have to look over their shoulder this season. And it was an entertaining game. I enjoyed the flow of the game. It was, I think on one of the previous shows, I talked about how there's just too much stop-start, with the substitutions and that kind of thing. This game had an open flow to it and a nice sort of feel about it. I did quite enjoy the spectacle from both sides. But it was Norrköping that were, clearly the better team in the end and came out 3-1 winners. An early goal from Pontus Almqvist in the 4th minute. Didn't waste any time there. And then Christopher Niemann, one of the top scorers in the league, he got another goal and to make it 2-0. IFK came back and it was 2-1. Pekka Lagermir with a really nice goal. Tobias Sahn, a fantastic assist. Through ball, sliced through the midfield and put Lagermir through and he finished well. And then Jonathan Levi off the bench in the 76th minute came on to make it 3-1 and a comfortable win for Norrköping in the end. And IFK Göteborg's winless run goes to 11 games.
Yeah, obviously, they have won the Swedish Cup, which is, you'd rather win silverware, wouldn't you, any given year? But you say 11 straight without a win now. How serious do you think the situation is in terms of league form for IFK Göteborg now, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, this is a question that was asked to the manager post-match, how serious this is. And they, IFK have kind of played it down. And I'm surprised that there's not more pressure on them. And I think there probably is going to start to be some pressure on them. Poyas Bargi came out, and Pekka Lagermir as well came out and said, we've played well. We're conceding cheap goals and we're not scoring enough, but all we can do is continue working. And, the manager came out and sort of said that, he's doing his best. And, he said that it shows that we've got leaders in the dressing room because the players came out and took responsibility for their performance, sort of patting them on the back for losing, to be honest. It seems like they're being a bit calm about it. Kenneth Anderson also came out afterwards and said that, we can't call this a crisis. I would argue that you have to call it a crisis. 11 games without winning. The cup is obviously very nice, but I think it's, it's not good times for IFK. And I've been scratching my head because, they're quite a weird team, to be honest. They kind of play, they're not a bad side. You can see what they're trying to do in terms of possession. They've got good players. They've got the likes of Al-Hassan Yusuf, who we've written about on the Y Scout blog, a player profile. Pekka Lagermir is a good player. Tobias Sahn is a good player. Hossein Maishi's okay. Of course, he was linked with championship clubs. Maybe he's not that level, but he's not a bad player. But just defensively, Victor Wernerson is a decent, individually, they're not bad players, but just collectively, at the back, they're not good enough, and going forward, they're probably not good enough. And it leads them to the situation they're in now, where they're just, they're dropping down the table, and they're only a couple of points now above the relegation zone. And I did say that I think they could fall into it, and now we're in the sort of a transfer window period. If they lose some players, then it's really going to be difficult times for them.
I mean, we might have a few first-time listeners listen to this episode. I mean, IFK Göteborg. When you think of that name, I always think quite a big club. I mean, let's just put it simply here. In terms of the Swedish football sort of pyramid, I mean, just how big are they? I mean, am I right in thinking back in the day, Sven-Göran Eriksson won European titles with this club? I mean, are they a fallen giant or heading that way?
Yeah, and I think, for anyone who is listening to this new, Göteborg is a city close to my heart. I obviously lived there, and, I love the city, I'll be honest. And, they are a massive club. There's no doubt about it. One of my fondest memories being there was the first game of I think it was the 2017 season, IFK Malmö. In the days of sort of pandemics and no crowds, if you saw the crowd that day, it was incredible. Malmö brought the away fans. There was flares going off, drums, fireworks. You picture the scene. It was like it was like going to war or something, walking to the stadium. It was like going to a war ground. It was really sort of like intensity, fans just really excited about the first game of the season. They played it at the old stadium. Obviously, they've got Gamla Ullevi. Strangely enough, they've got a stadium that's new called the Old Stadium, and then they've got the stadium that's called Ullevi, which is the Old Stadium. So pretty hard to get your mind around that one. But the Old Stadium is the new stadium essentially. But yeah, the old stadium is really atmospheric. It's a massive club at IFK Göteborg. There's no doubt about that. To be 12th in the table is not good enough. And, in general, their league finishes over the past sort of 3-4 seasons, just, they're a team in decline, it has to be said. Beck or Hacken have come sort of from nowhere. They're a much smaller club from Hisingen, part of Göteborg, much smaller attendances, but, they're 5th in the table right now. A good sort of 12 points ahead of IFK. That's just, it's not good enough. Put simply, IFK have had financial problems for quite some time now. And that's really dictated how they behave. They've had to sell their best players. They've got a new strategy in place to sort of play the young players and bring through players from their academy. But yeah, they are a massive club. So like you said, they've won European Cup. They've won the European Honours. Sorry, I remember them growing up when they played Manchester United. They've got a good pedigree, 18 titles. The second most after Malmö. They're a huge club. So this is really quite shocking where they are at the moment, if you take it in terms of how big they are. But it's not shocking in terms of their sort of trajectory the last 2-3 seasons. I mean, I've got some theories about where it's going wrong from a playing point of view.
Yeah, the sheer mention of the name Gamla Ullevi, kind of hairs on the back of your neck kind of go up. It's such a well-renowned club. Anyone out there who doesn't really support a Swedish team, maybe it could be a good chance to get on the bandwagon a bit while they're down there, and maybe you can enjoy some good times going forward. I guess the big question is, I mean, do you believe that they will have enough to stay up? You mentioned that there's some problems there that you identified. I mean, briefly, specific issues that they can fix quite easily or not?
Well, I think, when I was watching this game and they lost 3-1, and I was trying to sort of analyze in my mind and say, what's really going wrong? And you know what, Steve? I think this is a wider philosophical discussion about football in general. And it links to the Champions League that we just talked about, and it links to the Europa League as well. And, I hope the listeners maybe might have some perspectives on this. I'm keen to get people's views. I think that IFK are a team that playing football that is becoming arguably outdated. What do I mean by outdated? So basically, Poyas Bargi's come in. He's a young coach. He's in his 30s, I think, or maybe just turned 40s. Very young coach anyway, one of the youngest in Allsvenskan. And he brought in a lot of coaches from GIF Sundsvall. He brought a few coaches from GIF Sundsvall. Now, Sundsvall were a team, who in a few seasons ago before their relegation, they were a sort of really pure possession-based side. They had some Spanish coaches who got them playing that kind of tiki-taka style, really nice to watch, keep the ball, that kind of thing. But I think there's an argument, Steve, that tiki-taka football and possession football is actually on the out at the top level. And I think it's been replaced. And I think football is as a game of cycles. We go through different stages, different, Barcelona, that era of possession-based football, you have your teams at the top, don't you, Steve? And then you've got everyone trying to copy it after a while. Pep Guardiola came in and revolutionized football, there's no doubt. And everybody tried to play that tiki-taka style. Everybody wants to play this possession football. But I think what's actually happened is there's a new era of football now, and it's pressing. It's Jurgen Klopp football. It's gegenpressing. It's kind of quick transitions and quick breaks. And basically why Klopp, in my opinion, was so successful is because he managed to find a way to break that kind of possession game. High pressing, dispossess the team high in their own fit area of the pitch, get really aggressive on them, and then win the ball up high up the pitch, couple of passes and you're through on goal. And that pressing style has come in now, and that's kind of taken over, hasn't it, really? Liverpool, champions of England, obviously won the European Cup season ago. And I think that eras of football has kind of come in, and now people are trying to look at that. And possession teams in this era, they aren't that successful. Barcelona, if you look at them now, I mean, who missed that 8-2 game? They got destroyed. You could even say they don't even play really that kind of possession game anymore. They've kind of gone away from that philosophy to a certain extent. They try and play it, but they can't really play it anymore to the same level. And I think with IFK, that they're trying to play this possession game, but I don't actually think it really works. So I think there's an argument that maybe they've got good coaches, they've got good management, but maybe it's just a style of play that really is becoming a little bit outdated. They don't have players who can really keep the ball well enough, in my opinion. They've got good midfielders. Like I say, Al-Hassan Yusuf will go on to have a really good career. Wolves have been linked with him, teams like that. But, in defensively in transition, I think, football's now a game of transitions. And IFK, that's what I mean about Liverpool, teams like that. They're so good in transition. They get the ball, they break fast, direct running. People like Mane, Salah. IFK are the complete opposite of that. They're terrible in transition, in my opinion. In this game against Norrköping, there were so many counter-attacks for Norrköping. The goals came from, breaks, transitions. And that's where IFK just falter. They don't get back into position quickly enough. They play this position style, but they lose the ball too often. In terms of their touches in the penalty area, they're not one of the teams who gets many touches in the box. One of the worst, in fact, to be honest. And they lack in those kind of areas. So my question for the listeners is kind of maybe is that kind of possession football maybe going out of fashion a little bit, and maybe IFK sort of playing a style that's becoming slightly outdated?
Very interesting stuff, I must say. You say football goes in cycles. I mean, who knows? Maybe one day, long ball, hoof it long, 4-4 fucking 2 might come back into that cycle. But yeah, I do agree. We think we are in the era now of sort of pressing and quick counter attack sort of thing. So maybe they are a little bit behind the times there. IFK Göteborg, and are they going to survive? Do you think? Got enough?
I think they'll survive just because I can't see them going down. I think there are 3 worse teams than them. Without wanting to name names, although I can if you like, but I think there's 3 worse teams than them. But I don't think they can be too complacent. They've brought in a few names recently. Christian Kwaku's come in. They've made a couple of signings. I think they will make maybe some deals in this window. IFK, the one thing about them is they're an attractive club. They're always going to have big players wanting to come and play for them because they are one of Sweden's biggest clubs. So that gives them the advantage. They can attract a player like Kwaku who, you can't see him going to like a Falkenberg, really, someone like that. They can attract big names as well. I'm trying to say a lot of players who come back from abroad and they come back to Sweden. IFK is a destination that you want to go to because of their fans. You want to go to because of the size of the club. So I think from that point of view, I think they will be fine. But, I think from a wider point of view, the counter argument to that is obviously the financial issues mean that they're going to have to sell their best players. And I think Yusuf, they need him. He's massive in that centre of midfield, a really classy player. Even in this game, I thought he was really good. I think he's a really, really top player in terms of Allsvenskan level. I think he's one of the best in terms of Allsvenskan level. If they lose him in midfield, who sort of sweeps things up in that midfield? Who's going to link the play? It would be really worrying. Sana, they've tried him in centre midfield and that kind of thing. They will stay up, I think, just about. But it wouldn't surprise me if this carries on. And I think there will be some pressure on the manager increasing if they can't get a win soon.
Interesting. Anyway, let's move on to Norrköping side of things, and we're actually going to do a player in focus from Norrköping very soon. But briefly on the actual team as a whole, I mean, they had 3 defeats in a row. It looked like they're in a bit of a bad way, but maybe that victory can get them over that slump. They're at 4th position now. I mean, can it reignite a title challenge, or is it already too late?
For Norrköping?
Yeah.
This season goes so quickly that you can't. I remember saying a few weeks ago they're the team to beat, and now they're 7 points off it now. Malmo really gone to a different level in the last sort of 6-7 weeks. Went on a fantastic run, winning sort of 8 in a row, I think. So they're going to be hard to catch. I think they've just found a rhythm. They're playing very, very well. I think they will probably maybe have a little bit of a slump, but they've brought in some new faces as well. They, in fairness to them, they're scoring a lot of goals. They're not conceding huge amount, only 15 in 16 games. My thing with Norrköping is they concede too many goals. Even in this game, I don't think they control games well enough. One thing, in this game, they were 2-0 up and cruising, and then all of a sudden they were hanging on at one point. I think tactically they don't have that kind of ability of a sort of a Mourinho type thing in the old days where they can just kill a game once they get a 1-goal lead or a 2-goal lead or even that kind of thing. Or I don't think they manage games well enough. So from that point of view, no, I'd say no. But on the flip side, they got some really good players. I think player for player, they're one of the best teams in Allsvenskan. I think they got in every position they got really sort of top 2 or 3 in the league type players. They've just brought back Linus Wahlqvist, who left the league a few years ago, went to Germany, and he's come back now. He played in a fantastic cross for the 2nd goal. He's a right back who is a really good player at this level. I think he went to Dresden. He is a really good player in his position. Rasmus Lauritsen, one of the top centre backs in the league this season, without a doubt. The midfield has been a little bit creaky of late. Simon Tern and Franson, I think, a little bit flaky maybe at times. Haksabanovic, he was benched today, so he's been replaced, but he's been replaced with Isak Bergmann Johannesson, who we'll talk about shortly. Pontus Almqvist as well up front is looking really lively. He's come into the team. They've got Linus Hellenius now, who used to be at GIF Sundsvall. So they've got a lot of good players, but I just think their game management is a little bit worrying for them. I think I like Djurgården, the way they manage games, more than I do Norrköping, even though they've scored 10 more goals than Djurgården. So from that point of view, I think 7 points with 14 games to go is a big ask. They're going to have to go on a big run.
Yeah, they took game management for DIF, and maybe that's an example where the dual management team actually helps them out. 2 heads are better than 1, sort of thing. It always seems that they're pretty good tactically, doesn't it, Djurgården? But anyway, let's just cast our minds back to the Allsvenskan season preview. You may remember that episode, Jonathan. And every year we do our 10 players to watch. I was actually just looking back at some of my names, and one of the players that I had down has actually already left the league in Norway. It's Sikonieks at Strømsgodset. He only started 1 match. He's a shocking 10 player to watch. But anyway, one of your player thoughts was Isak Bergmann Johannesson from Norrköping. And we're actually he's obviously come on so much, we're actually going to be doing a player in focus episode on him here. So take it away from about this guy.
Yeah, well, yeah. I might ask you about Sikonieks at one point, because that's a bit of a strange one. But well, where do I begin with this player? Have you ever been, Steve, to Sutton Coldfield?
That's somewhere near Birmingham, right? I don't think I have.
It is indeed, and it has according to Wikipedia, it has a very active arts community. It is located. It's a suburban town in Birmingham, 7 miles northeast of Birmingham City, bordering Little Aston and Erdington. Historically, it's in Warwickshire, but it became part of Birmingham and the West Midlands in 1974. It's a parish town, became a parish town council for the first time in history in 2015. And yeah, it's a nice place, places of interest, Sutton Park. You might be wondering, why am I going on about Sutton Coldfield, some random small town in the middle of England? Well, the reason I'm going on about it is because that is the birthplace of Isak Bergmann Johannesson. Now, you think to yourself...
Get him cap for England now.
Yeah, you think to yourself, what is this exotic name? What is this player? The sort of players who were born in Sutton Coldfield range from Barry Bannon to Christoph Berra, former Wolves player. Those kind of people, players of note, anyway, notable residents. Sorry, I mean. But you've got Isak Bergmann Johannesson. Now the reason is because, and I mentioned it on the preseason podcast, his dad played in the Premier League, and of course, so he was born in Sutton Coldfield, and of course he's technically, like you say, eligible for England. Although I think Iceland will have something to say about that. But yeah, this is a big player, Steve, and I think it's about time we spoke about him because he's having a bit of a breakout season in Allsvenskan, as I'd sort of mentioned in the preseason pod. And I think it's about time now that we did talk about him in a bit more depth.
Definitely, yes. I thought it was going to be like a geography lesson for a minute there. It was, wasn't it? A Nordic football podcast, geography. Sutton Coldfield in England. But anyway, tell us a bit more about the player and what is his main position or positions and his main standout qualities so far this season.
Yeah, so he's made quite a lot of appearances this season, and probably more than you might have expected. He's a left-footed player. He can play on either wing. Been deployed often on the left wing, but can also play on the right-hand side. And also can play centre midfield. I think for the U teams of Iceland, he's been deployed as an attacking midfielder. He's only 17. He's still, developing, growing. But he's been praised for his mentality. Now, Jonathan Levi in pre-season said he's the most dedicated young player he's seen, teenager he's seen. He said the mentality of the player, his desire to improve is exceptional. And that caught my eye, of course, at the time. But he's the son of Joey Gudjonsson, as I mentioned there. He's, he played in the Premier League. So comes from decent football stock. Even his grandfather was a footballer. And yeah, his position-wise, he plays on the left. Now, this is a player who's got a really good left foot on him. He's got a couple of goals now in Allsvenskan. And I have to say, I don't know if anyone watches Alan Partridge or you used to watch the Day-to-Day with Alan Partridge. He used to be the sports reporter on the Day-to-Day, one of my favourite shows. But to quote Alan Partridge, he's got a foot like a traction engine because his goals, the two left-footed strikes and one against Helsingborg, were absolute rockets. Smashes it into the net, giving keepers no chance. Really, really good left foot on him. The sort of the way he drifts into the box late, when he plays in central positions for the U teams I've seen, it reminds me a little bit of Frank Lampard in a way. I know you won't like that name, but Steve, as a Leeds fan, but the way he drifts late into the box, he's got really good timing about his runs. When he plays on the wing, I mean, he's the second best player in Allsvenskan for dribble success percentage. 68.4% dribbles completed at this moment in time. So he's putting up good stats at such a young age already. And it was noteworthy today against IFK that Haksabanovic was benched and Bergmann Johannesson started. He laid on 2 assists, set up the first goal for Almqvist with a beautiful pass on that left foot, played him through, and played another assist for Jonathan Levi, the man who's been so praiseworthy about him. So there's a lot to like about Bergmann Johannesson. I know that Norrköping fans are really excited about this player. He's recently penned a new contract, so there are scouts watching him, that's for sure. And we'll see how long he'll be in Allsvenskan. But he is a really, really exciting player and definitely one you should watch.
No doubt, Ghent and the Lect have all been notified of his progress, as per usual. But I mean, he sounds like a hell of a young talent there. That I would love to see some of these guys last at least a couple of seasons in the Allsvenskan. And it's kind of sad that I always end up asking you that sort of question: how long can they keep it for? So I will have to ask you it again. But have you been surprised how quickly he's burst onto the scene?
Yeah, definitely. I've been surprised by how well he's done in the sense of, you just said it there about our players to watch. It's always, when you pick in 10, it's always slightly speculative, right? It could go well, it could go badly. And I think in Scandinavia, you've got two challenges. The first one is making sure that they actually play games when you go for young players. And the second one is making sure that they don't just get plucked up and leave the league so quickly, like you've just said. You know, I picked quite a lot of young players in my list this season, and at 17, he was one that I wasn't that worried about. I had a feeling he would definitely break through and get some games just from the sort of noises I heard about him. But I'm surprised at how well he's playing, I have to say. The way he takes the ball in possession, the way he breaks lines, the way his passing is really, really intelligent in the passes he makes. You know, in terms of through balls, like I say, just weight of pass, knowing when to release the ball and that kind of thing. You don't tend to see that in the 17-year-old. You know, usually it's kind of, you're very wasteful. I remember watching Cristiano Ronaldo at 18 years old. And I'm not trying to say this player is anything like Ronaldo, but I remember Ronaldo at 18 was so raw. You know, he was unbelievable dribbler, but his end product was really lacking for a good 2, 3, 4 years at Man United. And I remember players like Roy Keane used to get frustrated with him because, you know, he would always, you know, it took him a while before he started playing the right passes at the right time. One thing about Bergmann Johannesson I've noticed is he plays those passes at the right time. He knows when to pick a pass, and that shows maturity. That
is a hell of a skill, the quality to have at such a young age, I must say.
It really is, and it's rare. And I think, you know, from what I've, you know, like I said, Levi praising his maturity and that kind of thing, he seems like a really driven, not that I know him personally or anything, but he seems like a really driven character. You know, he seems to really want to improve and get better. Like I say, he was rewarded with a new contract just a few weeks ago, a contract extension, I think, till 2023, I believe. But yeah, the manager praised him. He said he's fantastic that he wants to stay with us. He's an exceptional player who every day learns, and he wants to achieve success. And he says that he's got everything in his power to become as good as he can become. It's a pleasure to work with Isak, he said. Yeah, and he's also, I think he's got 5 assists now in the league in total. So this is a player who, you know, he's doing big things at this moment in time, definitely worthy of player in focus. And I know that we've had a lot of people listening to the show recently, you know, working within football, just from our follower list, hasn't it, Steve? We've had a lot of new followers and that kind of thing listening. I'm pretty sure people will be flocking to watch this player, and you wouldn't be wasting your time.
Yeah, it's funny that my player in focus later on is like the opposite in terms of final decision and stuff like that. But just before we move on, I don't want to end on a negative note or anything, but what about weaknesses for this player that he needs to work on?
Well, consistency is the first thing. You know, I think one of the things I've learned, and, you know, obviously through Just Football as well, you know, I've been working on youth development and kind of, you know, player scouting, that kind of thing for quite a long time. And I think one of the things I've learned is do not get too overexcited about players. You know, I remember it was only about a year ago when I was at Chelsea Malmo. Do you remember that, Steve? We did a live feed on Periscope.
Yeah.
You remember that? I was at Stamford Bridge. And I remember that day, Callum Hudson-Odoi was like all the rage. Everyone was going on about him. Do you remember? You know, the Chelsea youngster. Yeah. If you look at him now, people talk about him like he's failed his career or something. I mean, he's only 19, I think. But a year has gone and people are acting as if he's a flop. You know, you need to give young players time and let them learn. You know, Bergmann Johannesson, you might go and watch him. He won't be the finished article. And even if you come back to me in 3 years' time, he's not going to be the finished article. He'll be 20. You know, so you need to give players time to develop. Of course, he'll make mistakes, like any young player. You know, I think sometimes there's a bit of a rush in scouting and in these kind of football, you know, blogs and Twitter and that kind of thing. Sometimes you overhype players too much, and that adds pressure to them that is a bit unnecessary. Yes, he's a very exciting talent, but he has a long way to go to become even a first-team regular at Norrköping. You know, he's not even close to being a first-team regular. I remember last season with Benjamin Nygren as well. You know, even though he was doing unbelievably well and I was really raving about him, there were games where he did nothing. You know, there were games where he was poor. And Bergmann Johannesson will have games where he does nothing, and he'll have games where he's poor. But you know, there's a lot that he'll have to learn. I think the main things probably will just be getting used to the league. Like I said, that consistency. But really at the moment, in terms of what his level and compared to his experience, there's not much you can really criticize from that point of view. So a long way to go for him, but so far he's been almost flawless, really, in terms of what he's done.
Well, there's a name for you to keep an eye out there for. Isak Bergmann Johannesson at Norrköping. So, well, let's round out a couple more things before we finish talking about the Allsvenskan section. And down at the bottom, in Helsingborg, we're going to have to talk about them again because, I mean, another pretty big club, really, in Swedish terms, right? I think didn't they win the title in something like 2011, 2012, around that sort of time anyway. Big club. They've had bad periods. They've relegation and promotion back up there. The bottom of the table on goal difference right now. What is going wrong with this? They should be higher, surely.
Yeah, really worrying times for them. Mixed disc got on the score sheet today, so Americans will be happy with that one.
Blue Moon, was it?
And fans of hairbands will be very happy, and caps. I think he has a sort of a side hustle selling caps, branded caps. But no, they're in a bit of trouble, and it's quite a funny story, to be honest, from the game today. They lost to Sirius, quite heartbreaking for Helsingborg fans. Last minute goal they conceded. But their captain, Andreas Granqvist, who was also captain of Sweden, don't forget, called the Sirius players, and this is a direct quote, so please excuse my language here, a bunch of fucking clowns after the game. And that was because he criticised them for celebrating. Now, Granqvist has cut quite a sort of forlorn figure this season. Like I said to you, he's one of the, you might remember World Cup 2018. He was one of the leaders of Sweden, when they made that nice run all the way quite deep in the tournament. But he's cut quite a frustrated figure this season, got quite annoyed about a lot of things just because his team's been playing pretty badly. And yeah, he was fuming about the game. He came out and said, go into the locker room and celebrate, you fucking clowns. Because the Sirius players couldn't get into the dressing room. The door was locked. And so they were celebrating in the corridor after the match. And Granqvist, grumpy Granqvist didn't like that and had a bit of a go at them. The manager, Henrik Rydström, came out as Sirius and said that my players have done nothing wrong. They weren't rubbing it in. They were just a bit exuberant, and the locker room was shut. And he said, I'm sure that's what happened. That's what's happened before. Axel Björnström came out and said, I'm sure that Sweden have done similar things when they were doing so well in the World Cup. So a bit of a flare up there, a bit of banter and controversy.
In here, Sirius have just done the double over them in the space of 4 days. What's that all about in terms of the fixture list? But
they do. They reverse it straight away.
They're not a bad side, though, Sirius, to be fair, are they? We don't really talk about them too much, but they're not a bad side. But yeah, bad times for Helsingborg down there. Got an interesting match coming up next against IFK, who we talked about their problems in the most recent podcast. So that is a right battle, isn't it, between two giants that are struggling at the moment? But
yeah, well, I mean, just to finish on Helsingborg, I mean, there's big pressure on Olaf Mellberg, and for anyone who likes sort of nicely coiffed beards, he's got a lovely beard. The former Aston Villa centre back, you may remember him, but he's under big pressure now for his job. I think he's come out and said it. I need to improve basically, and it's slightly worrying times. So they're not that bad in terms of expected goals. They're actually sixth from bottom in terms of expected goal, seventh from bottom in terms of expected goals against, and expected goals. They're not in the bottom three. They're fourth from bottom, which is not great, but they need to pick it up quickly. I mean, they've got a young squad and no money, so it's a bit of a struggle for them at the moment. But yeah, tough times.
Yeah, I do like a good beard. There's a guy I follow on Twitch streamer. He's a Scottish football expert. He's got a magnificent beard. I mean, if you get one growing nice, they're a bloody asset, aren't they, to have, I must say. But yeah, I do like a good one. But anyway, just to round off this Swedish section, transfer window. What's the latest there? Do you know what the dates are for this window, Jonathan? Any action? Yeah,
it's open. It's open till the 29th of July, I think. So we haven't got too much longer till it slams shut, as Jim White would say. There's been a few deals already. AIK have brought in a couple of players, in fact, today. They've brought Sotirios Papagiannopoulos, who's come back from Östersunds. He was at FC Copenhagen, didn't really work out from there, and he's come back to Sweden. Did really well for sort of like Graham Potter and Ian Birchnell. Centre back, much needed. They need defensive reinforcements. AIK are in massive crisis at the moment, even worse than IFK in terms of closer to the relegation zone. So a bit of defensive help has come in, Sotirios Papagiannopoulos. And they've also signed a player who I don't know much about, I'll be honest, Bojan Radulovic, who is a striker, I believe. And he's come in, signed a deal until 2023, only 20 years old. He's been described as a player with great potential. according to the sports manager, Henrik Aurelius. He's played in a few teams abroad. I think he played in Spain as well. Like I say, I don't know much about this player, so if anyone does, then let me know. He had a trial, I think, with Brighton and Hove Albion, or he was at Brighton and Hove Albion even for a while, the 23s, but didn't feature that much. So yeah, one to watch maybe up front. But the window's open. Linus Hellenius played today. Obviously, he was signed, coming back from Cyprus, and there's a few deals going on. IFK have signed a few players. Yeah, there's deals happening. I think the big question is who will leave. And if we do see players leaving, then that could have a big bearing. You mentioned Sirius. Quite a few of their players are being looked at right now. Stefano Vecchia had an incredible season so far. So I think the big question mark is who can Allsvenskan teams keep as well as who can they sign.
Yeah, the clock is ticking, as Jim White would say. And the clock is ticking down on this first part of the episode. We're going to have a bit of a break now. But join us after for our Eliteserien talk. I've got a player in focus from Rosenborg that you might be interested in about. We'll catch you again in a tick.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. After a short break, we are going to move on to Norway now, and we just had a bit of off-camera reminiscing there about Evian Tonon Gaillard, the team from 2011, the French team, and we were reminiscing about Pierre Bouby. He was a good player back in the day at Evian. Absolutely unrelated. We used to be French analysts, didn't we, Steve? And, used to work on the French league. But we've moved to Scandinavian parts now. We're going to start off with a question about Molde, because as I look at the table, they are 7 points behind Bodø Glimt. Now, is that a shock? And they've actually played a game more. So Bodø Glimt with a win could go well clear of them. 10 points even. What are your thoughts, Steve, on that? Let's start with Molde on this section. What's been happening?
Yeah, we certainly have some interesting halftime team talks, don't we? Sometimes random. Indeed, but Molde. I mean, this has really caught me off guard, to be honest with you. They obviously they lost a big head-to-head match against Bodø Glimt at the time of when they played each other. I think both sides were unbeaten, and I think that has kind of hit Molde's confidence a bit, and they just really struggled away from home, especially. You would not expect them to lose at Sandefjord and Sarpsborg, and then they had a kind of a freak home loss against Brann at home. At that stage, Brann were managerless. They hadn't won in Molde since 2006, and Molde had gone 2 calendar years effectively without losing at home in the league. So it was, in terms of head-to-head, it was a complete shock result, wasn't it? But look, last year I gave the manager a lot of praise for rotating the squad, and I was like, it was a big risk to do that, but it was paying off. This time it hasn't worked. Like, it feels like there's not enough cohesion in the team. It's chopping and changing too much. Injuries haven't helped them at all. Let's just say that, especially the defence. But if you were trying to predict that 11 each week, it'd be a nightmare job. You're not getting bloody 9 out of 11 correct, let alone 10 or 11, mate, because it's a disaster in terms of that. It's very random in terms of who plays. They always keep it quite quiet over who's sort of picking up knocks and niggles as well. So a collection of things have not helped them. You would still think the quality on paper would have been enough to beat the likes of Sandefjord and Sarpsborg, but they look quite bang average in some of these away games right now. It's very concerning. I'm not as worried about their home form. Like I say, it was a bit of a freak loss. It's just away from home, they suddenly look vulnerable, especially against sides who can defend well and just kind of use their head a bit, like sit deep a bit, like Sandefjord and Sarpsborg have done. So it's worrying times for Molde. They're 7 points off the top, and Bodø Glimt have got a game in hand. What a fantastic opportunity for the team from Northern Norway to win the gold medal.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Molde's sort of expected goals against, they are way sort of down there, really, relative to their position in the table. They're actually doing worse than Kristiansund, Odd, Rosenborg, Sarpsborg, Haugesund, and Bodø Glimt. for expected goals against. So it seems like, is that the key area for them, that they're just, just tailed off a little bit from that point of view?
Yeah, and this started right back at the start of the season, back in June, where Christopher Harrelside, the right back, went down with an ACL injury, literally right on the eve of the first resumption of fixtures. Now, Harrelside is a big player for them. He's just a solid sort of right back who does a bit of everything, but I think especially he was strong from a defensive point of view. And they've not really replaced him. They've sort of gone with Marcus Holmgren Pedersen and sometimes Henry Wingo. I mean, for me, neither of those players are good enough for that role yet. Or in Wingo's case, he's more of a right winger, if I'm being brutally honest. They're young as well. And so that's been a problem. They've had left back issues. Christopher Hagen was out for a while. Martin Björnbach is the latest injury, the key centre back for them. It's like he was the one linchpin who was fit all the time, and he's gone down lame. So, I mean, I've been a little bit impressed with John Kitolano at times at left back, but I always feel like he likes to bomb forward too much. So, defensive issues is where the main problems lie. But then there's also this mega rotation in attack and midfield, and this might be a rare example where like having a big squad is a disadvantage. You got to keep players happy, but from one week to another, you don't know who you're playing with. They've got Lecky James and Uwe Oimoamfa, who last season they played together in the same team a few times, but it seems this year it's either one or the other. And I get that because neither of them are really wingers as such. Uwe can play out there, but it's like you're always going to have one big weapon on your bench. You need to somehow get them in the same team again. It's a collection of woes adding up, and I think we'll look back at the end of the season. I still think they'll finish second at worst. And we'll look back at this phase and think this is where they lost the gold medal if they don't win the title.
Yeah, I mean, as you just rightly pointed out, there's a massive opportunity for Bodo Glimt now. 10 points clear halfway through the season. That is some advantage. You just identified it there. For those who maybe don't watch the league as much, is Magnus Wolff Eichholm still the main man there, or is his influence waned slightly? One reason I asked that, Molde don't have a single player in the top 10 goal scorers this season. I mean, they've got Owe, okay, he's joint 10th, 6 goals. They've got Hussein as well, 6 goals, but Lecky James 6 goals as well. But then no one in the top 9, 10. Are you surprised by that? And what is the influence of Magnus Wolff for those who don't follow as much?
No, he's still one of the top 3 players in the league when he's on song. But the problem is he's a very fragile player. You got to wrap him in cotton wool. Even last season, he very rarely would play more than 75 minutes in a game. So he's obviously stamina, natural fitness, and that isn't that great. Plus the chance of him getting injured, and he's the one player I can't really knock the manager for the way that he's dealt with him, because the matches came thick and fast. We're playing midweek, Saturday, etc. And even one round at Sandefjord away game, they actually rested him out completely. It was like it was just too much was adding up on him, and they had to take him out of the team. So at the minute, he doesn't feel like he's got as much of an influence on the games. He doesn't feel like he's in a great condition. Maybe that will change now. The games are generally just once a week, or they're Molde involved in Europe soon as well, which won't help them in that regard. So in terms of current form at the moment, he's not as much of a factor. But obviously when he's on song, he's still top class. It's been he's not had enough time to influence games because it's just the lack of minutes.
Yeah, and for those who are just wondering, the top 3 goal scorers in the league at the moment are Holmbert Aron Fridjonsson of Arlesund with 10 goals. Then you've got Amal Pellegrino, Christiansen, 11 goals, joint with Kasper Juncker of Bodo Glimt with 11 goals as well. So that's the top 3, just for those who are wondering. Steve, we've got European games this week. Molde are one of the teams in action. They're playing a Finnish side, I believe. What's your outlook on that? I mean, does their form give cause for concern from a European point of view as well, or are they going to be pumped up for that Champions League game?
I have to look in detail. I think it's just one leg, and I think they're at home for it. I do believe.
Yeah, they are.
Anyway, and I mean that's good for Molde because there's a big difference between their home form and away form right now, and they're very comfortable in their own surroundings, and they have been for a long time. and that includes European matches that they've done in the last couple of years as well. I have to say, embarrassingly, I don't know much about the Finnish league right now. I would love to know more about it. I feel like, it's a Nordic football podcast, that crying out loud. We should know more about it, shouldn't we? But I don't know much about cups. Kuopio, I think, is the city that it's from. I don't know really what sort of standard that league is right now. So I certainly don't want to disrespect them, but you would think the champions of Norway should be getting a win at home against the champions of Finland. It's just the way it is. But it probably suits Molde. It's just one leg because they don't want to be travelling around at the minute. They've got injury problems. It's a sort of match they'll probably win something like, they won't keep a clean sheet probably. So if Kuopio have got decent sort of attackers, then they can maybe take advantage. I don't think it will cost them in this particular round. I think after that, they would play Dundalk of Ireland or a Slovenian team, which would give them, that sounds winnable, doesn't it? But if they're going to go deep in any of these qualifiers, even trying to make the Europa League eventually, then the defence they need Martin Björn back to return. I think he's due back probably the start of September, I think. So that would be a big injury to return.
Yeah, and luckily for you, my trusted friend, we do have a little bit of a Finnish analysis for you, just very, very briefly. Well, I wouldn't call it analysis, but just a brief overview. The players to watch out for, probably for cups. I don't know if you can call them that abbreviated, but that's the literal spelling. They're second in the table at the moment in Finland, behind Inter Turku, 3 points behind. They have the joint second top scorer in the league is Ilmari Niskanen, a 22-year-old, looks like a wide player. Potentially, and they have the top assist provider as well by the name of Urho Nisila. Now it'll be a big test, Norway v Finland. We'll see how they get on, but there's one or two players maybe to watch out for if you're a Molde fan and you're going to be tuning in for the game. Let's move on from Molde now. Good analysis there, Steve. Thank you. And it looks like they're in a little bit of choppy waters. But let's move to a team that you want to talk about this week, kind of a team in focus. And it's going to be odd.
Yeah, it's about time they got a bit more airtime, really, on this podcast, to be honest, Odd. It feels like they, even the last couple of years under Fadugba, we didn't really talk about them enough, but I feel like they're doing so well that we can't ignore them now. They're absolutely on fire. They've won something like 6 of their last 8 games, or 6 of the last 7, including the last 5 straight. They're third in the table. And this is a team that most pundits pre-season were not writing them off as such, but I think the general consensus was they're going to go down to mid-table. They've lost a long-standing manager. The squad quality is not as good. It just felt like a real down year for Odd, and I think we've got to give them a lot of credit for what they've done so far. The manager is Jan Frode Nornes, who was the assistant manager under Fadugba for many a year. So he knows the club really well. I think he's used his knowledge to great effect. It's clear the players respect him. He knows the players really well, and it's one of them sort of internal takeovers, manager stepping up, that's worked really well. And it's a good example of how that can actually work in football, rather than bringing some randomer from the outside who knows nothing about your club. But so far, it's done really well for Odd.
Yeah, they finished 4th last season and 9th the season before. What makes you want to talk about them? They're currently doing pretty well, as you said. They're in good form. What's the outlook for them this season in terms of pre-season expectations compared to where they are now? What was the plan for them? They're currently 3rd in the table, as you said. They're 4 points clear of Rosenborg at this present moment, and 3 points behind Molde with a game in hand. What are they overachieving, or is that about expected, or what's the expectations at Odd?
I think the expectations pre-season from the media and probably their own fans were mid-table. It was fully expected that Torgeir Børven was going to move on from the club at some point, and he did to Rosenborg. So that was a big factor in, and a lot of the question marks were going to be who are they going to replace Torgeir Børven with. And they've brought in Mushiga Bakenga, who I've been often very sceptical about, but I'm actually going to give him a bit of praise in this analysis because he's been scoring some goals recently. I'm going to dig some stats out here from Scout, and what Odd are, they're a really good rounded club. They're 4th in expected goals. They're 5th best in terms of expected goals against. They're third in terms of average possession in the league with 55.9%, which is quite high, really. They're third in shots against. I mean, I think it's always a good thing if you're limiting the shots against you in a game. And by the way, Sandefjord are actually second for that, surprisingly, in shots against. You're doing something right, aren't you, if you're limiting opportunities against you? They're fourth highest in PPDA, which is effectively pressing. So that's one of their styles. They're quite energetic, and they're putting good pressure on the opposition. They've got a good mix of sort of experience and youth now in the side. I've always felt this as, in my mind, if you were to ask me the question in terms of average age of the team, I would have them as one of the older sides, but they're actually third youngest team in the league. Average age of 24.3. So only Strømsgodset and Bodø Glimt average younger there. So there's a lot more youthful legs in the side, which are clearly helping them. But there's some older dogs like Espen Ruud. I mean, he's 36 now, but he's still getting the job done at right back. Stefan Hagen, 34-year-old centre back. He's an absolute rock. If you're going to ask me, who are the best centre backs in the league so far this season, Stefan Hagen would have to be in the top 5 ranked. Very consistent side. So a lot of good things going around for Rod. They're just really all good all-round side. You wouldn't say they're relying on one individual or anything like that. But fair play to them. I think they've got a good thing going right now.
Yeah, there's a lovely video on their Twitter account, actually from their 2-1 win in their most recent game against Christiansen, them celebrating in the dressing room. I don't see much social distancing going on, but a lot of togetherness. Really looks like a really good team spirit. The manager or coaches dancing around, and looks like it's good vibes for Odd at the moment. They're third at the moment. Can we expect European football for them, or are you expecting a dip?
Well, they missed out on getting European football in the last game of last season. They lost when I think just a point would have been enough for them. So that was gutting. You kind of hope that they managed to get into that top 3 this time, really, don't you, a little bit? But, I mean, the big question mark was always going to be striker. And Turger Berven was the top scorer in the league last year. He'd already scored 4 or 5 before he left at Rosenborg this term. They replaced him with Mushiga Bekenga, who's got a bit of an interesting history. He was at Rosenborg, he was at Tromsø, Ranheim even last season. I've got to be honest, he's not a striker that I've ever really rated too much. I always felt there's too many down sort of cons with him in terms of either physically, has got an injury, or he just doesn't seem clinical enough in front of goal. He's the sort of striker you feel that he needs 3 or 4 chances to put the ball into the back of the net. But initially, they just use him as a bench option, substitute for the first 5 games. He's started the last 4, and he's actually scored some goals recently, some big ones as well. He got the winner in a 1-0 victory at Stabæk away, a really good header from a corner. And he scored again against Christiansen, a good sort of poacher's goal from a cross. And, I actually like what I've seen from Bekenga recently. Fair play to him. If he can keep that up, then I think it just shows that there must be something about the Odd squad that's really helped him gain confidence and integrate really well. Maybe it was wise just to use him as a substitute initially and sort of bed him in. Again, good management, really. Elba Rashani's been moved to the left wing. He was always right wing under for Germo. Rashani's a 2-footed technical wizard, really, and he's starting to find some really good form, putting some lovely balls in. Like I said, that defence is solid. They've got in the middle of the park, Joshua Kitolano is such a versatile player, can play pretty much anywhere. 18-year-old. The Kitolanos, I think there's like 3 brothers. They all play professional football, and he's added that youthful, energetic aspect into the team. Marcus Corsa, I've talked about him before in the podcast. Odin Bjørtuft was one of my 10 to watch. He started every game for them. So, yeah, that good mixture of youth and experience. I think there's a good environment. And you know what, Odd, I feel like I've underestimated them a bit this season. I think they'd look a banker to finish in the top 5 to me. It's just a question of exactly how high.
Yeah, and it seems like, there was some skepticism around their manager, wasn't it? And just generally Odd in general. You're happy with Jan Frode Nornes, are you, in general, just to sum it up?
Yeah, I'm happy with him. You know what? He doesn't make a song and dance about anything. Some managers trying to make it about him. And it's for good reason as well. Mourinho was good at that, wasn't he, back in the day, deflecting sort of attention on him off the players. But you never really hear too much from Jan Frode Nornes just gets on with the job. He's pretty light-hearted, I think, and easygoing. And do you know what I mean? He's one of them managers that just kind of floats under the radar a little bit, actually, when really he's doing a very good job so far. Like I said, he knows this squad really well. Clearly, he's used that knowledge to good effect, and I think his management's been really good. His tactics, he's kept it a 4-3-3. They've always been 4-3-3 for years, so that's not impacted it. I must be said they've generally had injuries go their way, apart from Tobias Lauritsen's broken his leg, a right winger, sort of attacker, striker who, and they've had Fredrik Semberger, one of the centre backs, has been out all season. Apart from that, they've had no problems in that regard. They've got quite a small squad, so if some of these older dogs did suddenly go down again, then they might have issues. But so far, so good for Rod, and well done to them.
If you were to name, let's say, outside of the Bodø Glimt coach, because I think that probably is, I suspect, maybe your first pick. Who are the top coaches in Eliteserien? Where does Nornes rank, and who are the sort of top 3 or 4? I
really like Christian Mikkelsen at Christiansen. He's been fantastic since he got them promoted here. But he plays with a certain style. He doesn't like the ball too much. They will always be in the bottom 3 in terms of possession. Very counter-attack based. So could he switch to, say, a bigger club that demanded a more possession-based tactic? I don't know. But you can only find out, can't you? But he's brilliant, I think, in so many ways. So Christian Mikkelsen is up there for me. I suppose you'd have to include Henrik Pedersen at Strømsgodset. I really like him. Fadugba is a very experienced coach at Vålerenga. Those are sort of names that you want to put in there, really, at this point in time. And then there's sort of managers that like Vegard Hansen at Mjøndalen, who've never had much to work with. So, Mikkelsen for me. I think Jan Frode Nornes is too early to say. We've only seen him in management for 3 months. But so far, so good with him. He could be one of these guys that, just turns out to be really good. But, I like Kjetil Knudsen at Bodø Glimt and Christian Mikkelsen at Kristiansand. I'm a big fan.
Good stuff. And then we're going to move on to, well, you just mentioned Mjøndalen there. Would you like to talk about them now, or do you want to move on to the player in focus?
Oh, we'll do the player in focus now. Actually, forgetting Marty Cifuentes at Sandefjord, who's been amazing there this year so far. He's top quality, the Spaniard. Fair play him. No, we'll move on to the player in focus now. And the lad I'm going to be talking about is a Rosenborg youngster called Emil Konradsen Ceide, who is this is an interesting one. This isn't going to be like your sort of player in focus where there was a lot of positives to say and not too many negatives. This is more of a balance sort of thing. Comes out of a tweet I did a day or two ago where I was actually criticising him. And
before you get into that, I mean, yeah, just for the listeners, when you did tell me you're playing focus this week, I will just say to the listeners that you did say that you're not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm a little bit on tenterhooks here at the moment as to what's going to happen. Are you just about to pick out a player who you're going to focus on and trash him to pieces, or what's the deal here? I mean, who is this player? I mean, he's at Rosenborg. He's 18 years old, as you said. What's the lowdown with this guy? And I like it. I've got clenched teeth at the moment, just waiting for this section.
This is a complicated one and a delicate one because, I don't want to go in too hard on this player, but I think there are some negatives that have to be addressed with him as well. Let's start off by saying he's only 18-year-old. He is 19 in September, so let's call him effectively 19, right? Anyway, he is a talent that's sort of the last couple of years he's been talked about. And I think last year he signed a new contract through to 2021 or 2022. And I, on this very podcast, have said that Rosenborg need to bring through more of their own youngsters again. If anything, just for like the sheer passion that they're going to bring to the team. And I'm pleased that in that respect that they've given him enough game time. Mostly probably because Samuel Adegbenro has been injured, by the way. He wouldn't be first choice in that regard. But he plays on the left wing. Basically, he's an inside forward. or inverted winger, however you want to call that. He's got a strong right foot on him, prefers that. A reasonable left peg, but that's his sort of position on the field. But there's a lot of positives to this player, and there's a lot of negatives to this player. And I've got some stats from Y-Scout coming up very soon to back this up. But in general, this is something that's been building up. The amount of times I watch a lot of Rosenborg games, I bet in a lot of Rosenborg games, often on them or needing goals from them. And the amount of times I've screamed at the screen or TV when I'm watching this player on the ball, like, I'm just saying, cross the fucking ball or shoot there, or like there's been a horrible finish. And it's just something that's consistently adding up. And in my experience, that is not a good sign.
What position does he play?
Left wing. He's playing on the left wing as an inside forward sort of role. So he's cutting inside a lot. Now, let's start with some positives for this player, because the big one is dribbling. And he averages 10.63 dribbles per game, which is the highest in the whole Eliteserien, right? And he has 62.8% success rate with dribbles. Now, that is bloody good. Fair play. And that is his big strength. He has his fantastic ability one-on-one with a defender. And I'll be honest, sometimes I actually wonder how he does it. I'm like, it feels like the defender's in a good position, or he's not going to make anything of it, but it has this knack of just sort of getting by them, certainly to the byline and stuff. So he's really good in terms of the one-on-one dribbling. Not necessarily making him brilliantly technical, though. I think there are some technical flaws with the player as well, but that's really good. He has touches in the area, 5.09 per game on average. That's 12th. Progressive runs, he averages 5th overall in the league for that. And in terms of that average progression of run, it's quite high. It's in terms of meters, he ranks one of the highest in the league for that. He tends to advance the ball. He's a player that often finds himself in a lot of good space. But when he gets there, there's some negatives that I'm going to talk about in a minute for this player.
Yeah, and just a little bit of background about him. I mean, quite a remarkable, not necessarily footballing story, but a human story. He's of Haitian descent, and I'm reading that he fled Haiti just a few weeks or a week before the earthquake there, which is quite incredible, really, from a human point of view. Discovered by the chief scout of Tranmere and went to a football school in Liverpool for a while as 12-year-old. And then Tromsø wanted him but didn't manage to get hold of him, and he ended up at Rosenborg. Yeah, you said that, you know, there's some positives there and you've got a few negatives to point out. Just before you do answer that, Steve, what kind of player is he in terms of number of games? Is he someone who's become a first-team regular there, or is he, you know, on the fringes, or what's his sort of status within the squad and team? Well,
since Samuel Azinbenro got injured, he's become the starter in that left wing position. Rosenborg always play 4-3-3. That is the way they play. So they have to have a left winger on the field or an inside forward. So he's taken over that spot. So right now, until Samuel's back fit, and actually he was on the bench at the weekend, so let's just see how it goes. Then he's the starter. So he's not lasting the full 90 minutes too often. He's generally getting subbed off about sort of 60, 70 minutes. But that's his sort of status within the squad right now. Quite good for an 18-year-old, nearly 19, I suppose, in that regard. It's good to see him get minutes. But and you're right, there's a very interesting human story there as well with the player, and he's Rosenborg through and through, the lad. And you can tell he gives a lot to the team in terms of that.
But you've got a bone to pick with him.
There are a few bones, yeah. Let's just start with he hasn't actually scored a goal yet this season. Now, I don't know about you, if he's had enough minutes on the field to have hit the back of the net. If you're playing 4-3-3, you want goals not just from your striker, but you want goals from your wingers, right, at some point. And now he hasn't scored a goal. His expected goals at 1.36, which is not that high, is it? I mean, that's worrying in terms of he should have scored at least once by now. And secondly, why is it not a bit higher? He feels like the problem is, right, this is a player that finds himself in a lot of good positions, either by receiving a pass, I think he's got good spatial awareness. He finds good space. Or, like I said, beating this man one-on-one with dribbling and getting into great position. And then you find him in these positions, and it feels like when there's an obvious cross on, he either doesn't deliver the cross, or the cross is not technically good enough. Or there's an alternatively a situation where you feel like you've got to shoot now, work a position to shoot, and either he then tries to pass it, or when he shoots, he's just not a good finisher. Now, I just don't think this player possesses. He's not silky enough technically. He's a little bit like a Canu back in. I mean, he's nowhere near the level of a Canu or anything like that. But that's the sort of technical player he is. He's a big sort of lad, physical. And I always prefer like a silkier sort of technique, like Samuel has there. And I think that lets him down. I almost wonder if his ceiling's a bit low, actually, in terms of the technique there. I mean, he could develop in that regard, but it infuriates me that the final decision or the final act in his, armory there is just not good enough right now. It's very frustrating.
I mean, he's played for Norway's under-19 side. He's played for, as a Norwegian youth international, likes to step over, that kind of thing. I mean, is your frustration, because I think with young players, it's pretty hard. I mean, it sounds like you've got, some negative things to say about him. I wonder if that's more the managers. Is it more kind of the squad, the fact that maybe he's not ready actually to be given the responsibility he maybe is having in the team? And does that highlight sort of maybe issues with Rosenborg's squad, or does that highlight maybe issues with Rosenborg's management? I mean, is he being promoted above maybe his level now? Or are you saying that it's sort of a player who's kind of been overhyped maybe? Are you suggesting there's a lot of hype about this player and maybe he's actually not worth the hype? What are you trying to say from that point of view? Because it's either, a player 18 is never the finished article. So are you saying perhaps he should, not be in the team as much as he is, and that's an indictment on Rosenborg? Or are you suggesting that maybe he's been overhyped?
Yeah, I mean, you may come across as I'm stuck in no man's land a little bit with this analysis, and in a way I am. But we look at like 15.8% of his crosses have been accurate. Now I think that's a shocking low percentage for crossing accuracy, right? If you need to be at least 30% plus, preferably near the 40% mark for accuracy.
Yeah,
nowhere.
Let me put it like, before you carry on, let me just put it like this. I mean, what made you choose this player? Is it because he's been hyped, or what's the rationale behind it? Is it just a player that you feel is underperforming, or what?
Oh, because he's a young talented player who probably has been perceived in some quarters as being the sort of his next big talent at times.
Right.
Maybe not so much this season, but sort of maybe last year. And there's been a couple of performances, like he had a couple of assists against Salzburg in the 5-1 win, and I saw a few were raving about him.
I get you.
So
you're sort of saying that he's maybe been a little bit overhyped slightly by certain quarters.
Perhaps, yeah. That's what I asked the question on Twitter. I'm like, is he slightly overrated, perhaps, or not? I even can't make my mind up on this player at times either. I just think he's an interesting guy to talk about. Like, we can probably look back on this in like 5 or 6 years' time and wonder where he is. I mean, I'm not sure. I think his ceiling, I think he goes one of two ways. He's a sort of player who could probably come up with one really good season at Rosenborg somewhere where he has inflated numbers, and then he'll get a move to somewhere like Holland, Belgium, whatever. And I just think he'd go there. I just got a gut feeling he'd probably be found out and not be good enough and end up coming back to Norway. Alternatively, he could stay, probably sort of play at Rosenborg most of his career and just be a very sort of a good Eliteserien player down the years. That's how I see him, and some might see his ceiling a lot higher than me, but and it's very young. You've got to give him time, like you say. But there's something that just, I say, there's enough bones that I want to pick with the player that it's frustrating. I'm just not that confident he's ever going to be anything that great than sort of Eliteserien talent. It's awful to say that, isn't it? But at the same time, there are positives. Offensive duels won his second in that. He gives a lot. He's a very determined player. He gives a lot for the team. Passionate, clearly gives a lot for the club, and that's worth a lot in itself. it's good to see them giving minutes to these youngsters. Here's the problem, right? When you're a youngster at a big club, right? You need to be ready for that role right away because the spotlight is on you right from the start, and you've got to swim straight away. You're thrown in the deep end, and you've got to swim pretty instantly. You haven't got time to develop and bed in a big club like Rosenborg within Norway's system. And at the minute, he's shown enough, I think, to deserve staying in the team. It's interesting to see how he'll progress. It'll probably do him some good when Samuel's back and they can sort of rotate game time, that the spotlight's off him less. I think he's been very good as a substitute when he's come on as well. And that might be his sort of thing. Is he going to be an interesting player to watch going forward? I don't want to. I may sound really harsh on this player. I don't want it to sound like that. If he's listening, honestly, I want him to completely ignore me and just prove me wrong, please, and become a really, really good player, because I would love to see that. But there's a lot of sort of mixed things that I've seen from him on the field.
Well, nobody can ever accuse the Nordic Football Podcast of just endlessly hyping players. That's a fairly reasoned and fair downbeat, even you could say, analysis of a player there. So keep an eye out for him. Konradsen, Ceide there, and I think one thing I would just add before we move on is, you're right. Sometimes players do get overhyped, don't they? And maybe this will be something that he can kind of use and move. And if he does listen to it, maybe there are elements of his game he can work on and improve. I always think that if a player's being criticised when they're that young, it makes me question the manager straight away, because if they're getting the responsibility in the team, does that mean they're either lacking in squad numbers, or he's being played more than he should be, or that kind of thing? But certainly I'd love to hear views of people. Tweet us at Nordic Foot Pod if you agree with Steve, or if you think maybe he's being a little bit harsh. And similarly with Bergmann Johannesson, if you think I'm being too kind, maybe there are weaknesses and maybe I should, maybe I'm getting carried away. Feel free to tweet us and let us know your thoughts. It's an open forum on this podcast, and we are always happy to debate.
I part of me almost feels I am being too harsh. I'll admit it myself. I'm really interested to hear what other people's opinions are of this player. I would love to see him work on his game, especially that final ball. And somehow I'd love to get that technique a little bit more silkier. And whether that could be learnt at Rosenborg, I'm not sure. It might need higher quality coaches to do that. But I wish him well, certainly. He's a really interesting player. Yeah,
I mean, I think your criticism is not maybe necessarily of the player. I think there may be of where he is in terms of his status. So I think you're coming from it from an honest place. You're not slamming players for no reason. You've always got a reason to kind of pick holes in their game, which is totally fair enough. Let's move on to you wanted to talk about Mjøndalen, and if we look down the bottom.
This is an example where I've actually been proven right. Because I did say a couple of podcasts ago, don't worry about Mjøndalen, they will turn it around, give Vegard Hansen time, and they will see an improvement in results. And they have done. They've beaten Haugesund 1-0, and they've beaten Brann 1-0. And I'm going to talk about the Brann match, because I think it's fair to say they completely shithoused their way to this 1-0 victory away from home. I was a Brann backer in terms of betting, and I think half of the betting world was on Brann in this game. It was Kåre Ingebrigtsen's first game in charge for Brann. They appointed him as coach. I gave my thoughts on him in the last episode. Interesting appointment. And there was a lot of hype about Brann, to be honest, this game. Everyone presuming they're going to get this great win, his first match in charge. They just beaten Molde away from home. It looked like a Brann banker, really. And Mjøndalen, for the second year in a row, they've gone to Bergen, and they kind of fluked a result. Last season, they got a 0-0. And they didn't have a single shot in the game, let alone a shot on target. Jonathan, if you might remember that match, it was a ridiculous 0-0. And they've kind of done the exact same here. They've had one shot on target, and they've won the game 1-0. I don't know how Brann didn't score here, really. It felt like they had enough dangerous opportunities. The goalkeeper, Makani, made a few good saves from Mjøndalen. But you know what? Fair play to them. They've come here, they've dug in, they've time wasted as much as they can tactically, set pieces, the physicality, typical shithousery as you would call it. And, fair play to them, because if they go there and try and sort of outplay them in an attacking point of view, Sandefjord tried to do that a couple of months ago. It didn't work out. They got ripped apart. They know their strengths. Vegard Hansen, he gets the most out of the team. And yes, they were lucky, but it was kind of designed luck, if you know what I mean. They knew that they were going to get a result. They would need that luck. And I always praised him highly. He has that knack. He's quite willing to dig in and grind, and I think you've got to respect that out of the side ultimately.
Fantastic stuff. And yeah, the bottom two, just to wrap it up, is Start and Arlesund. Arlesund with just 7 points, 1 win out of 14 games. I mean, yeah, Mjøndalen are 7 points ahead of them, and then Viking sort of 14th at this moment in time, and in that relegation playoff. So a lot of work to do for Arlesund, Start, and Viking, and it looks like Mjøndalen are picking up. I always remember your interview with their manager, which you can always dig into our archives, subscribe to the Nordic Football Podcast on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from, and go back into the archives and tuck in. We had a Mjøndalen episode. So I think that's about it for this week's show. We had 2 players in focus. We'd love to get your thoughts on them. And please do, if you enjoy the show, do share it with people that you know that might be interested. We do have some listener questions. I think we'll just very, very, very quickly touch on 1 or 2 of them. And also, before I do that, I just want to say a massive thank you to our followers on Patreon, our subscribers. We've had a few new subscribers. We're going to give you a shout out in the next show. But for now, you know who you are, and you can bask in the glow of knowing that we love you. And we'll give you a big shout out coming soon. But yeah, just for those who have subscribed recently, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want to support us. And we'll be doing a bonus show very soon. In fact, we may do a bonus show this week or next week to cover the European games and a little bit more. So a treat coming for our Patreon subscribers fairly soon. Steve, I'm going to just ask you the first listener question. We will wrap them very quickly, so please keep it brief. But I'm going to ask you, do you think that the added rest between games will change anything in terms of tactics and lineups? Obviously, it's been a packed schedule in Norway and Sweden. Do you think now that maybe with the schedule being a bit more calm, this is a question from @RileyPick345, do you think it will calm things down and change tactics and lineups?
Yeah, for the sides that have been rotating unusually, expect them to go into sort of more consistent 11s. Even a side like, from Norway's point of view, Kristiansand, who rotate a lot anyway, even they might get a bit more consistent. But yeah, I think it will help a lot of sides. One thing I noticed with teams, they were starting to get a bit tired when it was midweek weekend a lot. So I think things will settle down again in that regard. But I just expect a lot more consistency, less squad turnaround.
Yeah, and then we've got a couple of questions on our Allsvenskan, which I will just very briefly answer. I mean, are Elfsborg real contenders for the title? I'm going to say no. And 4 points off it. But I think over the long stretch, I think Malmö will outscore them and concede fewer than them. So I struggle to see Elfsborg really surpassing Malmö. I think they're having a fantastic season, Elfsborg, I have to be honest. And we did talk about them on a couple of shows back if you want to tuck in and listen to the archives. But no, I think Djurgården might finish second, actually, if I was giving a prediction right now. Norrköping, potentially could be up there as well. But I think Elfsborg, their big challenge is to try and get into the European places, that top 3. So I think that's their challenge rather than the title. I just don't see, although Jesper Carlsen, has to be said, has been one of the players of the season. We did have a question from Ted Cruz, my son, about the Royal League. Going to leave that one for this week, Steve. I think we're going to run out of time.
Royal League, it would be the main winners every year. FC Copenhagen, no doubt about it.
There you go. Did really well against Manchester United, although they didn't win the league, did they? So
League, Europa League outlook. I think I kind of briefly touched on that with Molde. That was a question from Team Overs, by the way. Thanks very much for that, and also your Patreon support. In terms of Europa League, I think Rosenborg got a decent draw. Djurgården, I didn't like the look of their draw, John. I must say, I think Celtic lying wait quite early, so that's worrying.
Yeah, well, they've got to get past quite a big club, haven't they? Ferencváros from Hungary, who, in terms of support, I know that they've got really sort of passionate ultras and that kind of thing. They're one of those teams that you always see on tifo websites and that kind of thing. You know, I've never actually been to one of their games, but I know that they're you know, really well supported and quite a historic club. I think it'll be a challenge for Djurgården, but like I've said, I think Djurgården are on the up. We haven't talked about them a huge amount this season, and we will rectify that in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out. But I'll be watching that game. I'll look forward to it. But I think they should get through, and hopefully they can then meet Celtic, which would be nice. You know, don't forget they're still the champions of Djurgården, and they're doing their best after a fairly poor start to sort of challenge.
Yeah, I know there was a couple of other questions out there. So Magnus Schaft and Martin Eriksson will answer those on Twitter or something, because we are overrunning now on this episode. So we'll have to leave it there for the question. But thanks very much for them. And we'll get back to you as many as we can in the future. Yeah,
that's it for the Nordic Football Podcast this week. A bit of a longer show, but I hope you've enjoyed it. And as I say, you can subscribe on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. You can reach us via email. Check us out on Twitter and the links there. I think it's nordicfootballpod@gmail.com. If you've got any inquiries, we've had a lot of new followers from within the game at this moment in time. So, you know, if you do want to take advantage of our analysis and our scouting and our capabilities, then do get in touch. And we've got a Patreon, as we've mentioned. So great show, I think. And if you want to sort of rip into Steve for his slamming of 18-year-olds on Twitter, then do. And we look forward to the next episode. As I say, we will be providing some bonus content on Patreon in the coming week or two. So we're preparing that right now. And if you've got any suggestions for things you want us to see us cover, then do let us know as well in the comments when this episode come out. But for now, it's all over, isn't it, Steve? And hope you have a good week, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, same to you, Jonathan. Thanks very much for listening. I bid you all goodbye. Stay safe. Take care. And we'll see you again very soon.